Hey friends, this is Dana from Seedless Signs. Thanks so much for joining me today. I am filming this video during the coronavirus outbreak, pandemic, whatever you want to call it. And we are all kind of stuck in our homes. And so I thought it would be fun to create a project that you could do with your family, with your kids. And so instead of just ordering a sign that's already done to hang on your wall, let's do a project together. And it's something that you can do with your kids as your art class requirement, or just something to do to pass the time, because I know that we're all sitting at home and going a little stir crazy. So I created these 4 designs for this project. We're going to be doing one of them today. And I wanted to just kind of share with you what's in the kit, and then we're going to get started. So in your kit that you are receiving, you're getting a blank piece of wood. It's about 7 1/4 by 7 1/4 square. You're also receiving a pre-weeded stencil. The stencil is the blue material. And then on top of that stencil, you're getting some transfer paper that goes over the top. And that transfer paper helps get the stencil from this paper to the block of wood. You're also getting a small paintbrush like this. And then you're receiving a larger paintbrush, larger than this. I have not received my supplies yet. They're coming tomorrow in the mail. But you're getting a 1-inch foam paintbrush, and you'll be using that paintbrush to paint the background of your sign. You're also going to be using some sandpaper. This is actually a foam sanding block that I have on hand in my garage, but you'll also be receiving a small piece of fine grit sandpaper in your kit, and you'll be able to use that. The only things that you will need to provide on your own are the paint that you're going to be using, as well as a Cricut weeding tool. And I'll show you those in a little bit. So why don't we go ahead and get started? First thing that we're going to do is actually paint this block. I am painting mine white. You're more than welcome to paint it anything that you want to paint it. My favorite paints to use are actually like paint samples from Home Depot. I like them because they have a built-in primer, and they're not real opaque or transparent. They just coat and cover better. But I'll be using white paint for my background. I have mine in a squeeze bottle, but yours probably would come in a paint sample container, or you could just use white latex paint that's from your house, whatever you want to do. So I'm just going to squeeze out some paint here. It's pretty surprising how little amount of paint that you actually need. But what I'm going to do first is just paint the sides. And then I'm going to paint the top. When you're doing your painting, you want to use thin, long, even strokes. We don't want gloppy paint, okay? We want it to be nice and thin and even, because it dries faster that way, and it dries evenly. And if your paint is too globby on the surface, then you actually run the risk of your paint peeling up when you pull that stencil off of the top. We don't want that to happen. So we want to use nice, thin, even strokes as we're painting. I actually probably put too much paint on here, so. You're going to paint probably, if you're doing white, 2 coats of paint for a nice, even cover. Another way that I like to paint wood for my backgrounds is actually using a paint roller. So if you would prefer to use like a 4-inch foam roller, that gives really great coverage, as well as it keeps the thickness of the paint really consistent and thin. That's generally actually how I paint my backgrounds, is with a roller if I'm painting the background. But since I didn't want to have to provide a roller in everybody's project, you guys got paintbrushes instead. Now, many of you have seen when people are doing live demonstrations of things. I'm like particularly thinking of cooking shows, how they they kind of prep things ahead of time, and they make the dish, and then when they open up the stove, they actually have one that's already done. So I'm actually going to do the same thing. Surprise, surprise. So anyway, let's say we finish this and we've got 2 coats of paint on that. Yay. Obviously mine is way too thick on here, but what you're going to do is just spread out that paint really good, and you're going to do 2 coats of paint. So if you want to go ahead and pause this video so that you can let your first coat dry and then put that second coat of paint on there, you'll be able to come back to this spot right here where I actually already have 1 paint. So we've got our 2 coats of paint on our block, and everything is perfectly dry. We don't want to work with wet paint at all. The first thing that you're going to do before putting your stencil on is take your sandpaper, and you're just going to smooth the top of your board just a little bit. What we're doing is creating a smooth surface for our stencil to go on, but we're doing something else that's kind of secret that I learned from a friend of mine. When you sand on your board, you're creating a little bit of paint dust, and I don't want you to wipe it off. I want you to leave it there. And the reason why is because when we place our stencil on the board, on top of that paint dust, when it's time to peel it off, it'll actually peel off easier. And you don't run the risk of pulling the paint off of the background of your sign. So if you've already wiped the dust away, just go ahead and resand just a little bit so you have that paint dust on there. And now we're going to work with our stencil. So here's your stencil. The blue is the stencil, the white is the backing, and the clear gridded blue stripes and lines is the transfer paper. And that transfer paper is sticky on one side that it's attached to the stencil. And what it does is it takes it from the backing of this and puts it on the sign. So what we're going to do is lay the stencil face down, and you're going to peel the backing away. And the way that you do that is just hold on to a corner and pull the backing away like this. I don't like rip it off really fast. I do it kind of nice and slow, and just be mindful and keep an eye on making sure that none of the little pieces on the stencil pull off and come onto the backing. You don't want that. You want to make sure everything stays intact. Okay, so now we've got our stencil here. See that? I'm going to flip it over. Hold it up in the air like this, sticky side down. And I have cut this stencil to be the same size as your block. So make sure that you use the sides of the block of your sign to line up where this stencil goes, but it should go just right on top. Remember, you only have 1 shot with this. You have 1 stencil. So make sure that you're careful with this. If you have kids that are doing this project, make sure that you're helping them with this part. This is probably the most stressful part of the whole project. So you're just gonna line it up over the top, kind of hover in the air over the top of the sign until you're right where you wanna be, and then just gently lay it down. If it's not perfectly straight, it's okay. It really, really is okay. It's not a big deal. You wanna lay it down so that it doesn't have any wrinkles in it, okay? And then you just wanna use your fingers like this to just kind of make sure that it's all down on the board. Okay, once you've done that, then you're gonna peel up the transfer paper, which is the clear with the dark blue grid, okay? And so you're just peeling this up like this, pulling it back on itself rather than pulling up. Okay, now, before throwing this piece away, if you look at mine, when I peeled it up, you'll see that the inside of my R is not there, and it's because it came up on the transfer paper. The easiest way to get it off of here and onto your sign is to just take your paper, your transfer paper, and locate where that stencil sticker piece is supposed to go. Just push it back down again, and then when you peel it up, make sure that it stays down. So there we go. You can throw the transfer paper away. And this is what you have here. Pretty cool, huh? Okay, next step is to seal the stencil. This is something that not everybody does. But I like to do it because I don't like stenciled signs that like bleed underneath. That's, ugh, yuck, looks yucky. So I like to seal my stencil. And the way that I do that is I use a layer of paint that's the same color as my background, which for me is white. And all I'm gonna do is just paint over the entire design with that white paint. Nice, really, really thin strokes. You really don't need a lot of paint for this. All we're trying to do is create a bond and like a dam on every edge of the stencil so that the paint, when we do the actual design, so that the paint does not bleed. So this shouldn't take too long. And then what you want to do is make sure that this completely dries until it's dry. And then once it's dry, we will actually paint the colors of the design. So I'll see you back in a few. Okay, friends, now that you have your stencil all sealed, just like this, we're actually going to paint the design, which I know for your kids, this is exactly what you wanted to do. All this other stuff is kind of boring, isn't it? But it's all important. So I have chosen the colors that you saw in my original design. And the reason why I chose them is because I had them on hand. So my hope is that you have these paints on hand and you can just use the paints that are in your garage or in your craft room. They could be acrylic paint, they could be chalk paint, they could be paint samples. Whatever it is that you want to use and have on hand is fine. The only thing I would say not to use is going to be a glittery kind of a paint. There's something inside of glitter paint that's real rubbery and stretchy. And when you use glitter paint with stencils and then you peel the stencil off, you oftentimes will peel off the glitter paint as well. So let's not use glitter paint. But like I said, I really like using paint samples that I get at my local hardware store. I'm also using some chalk paint just because I like the color. And the cool thing about this project is that you don't need like very, very specific materials. You can just use what you have on hand, minus that glitter paint, okay? And you also need very, very little paint for this project. It's actually pretty phenomenal how little paint you need. So I've chosen 4 colors, actually 5 colors for my design. You can choose whichever ones you want. And you're just going to start painting your design in. Again, thin, even strokes. You don't want thick, gloppy paint, okay? Nice long strokes too. Rather than a lot of this, you want to do this. Nice long strokes. And then in between colors, just clean your paintbrush off in some water. I'm using a canning jar, and dry the paintbrush off using a paper towel, and then just move on to your next color. Depending on the kind of paint that you're using, you're going to probably need multiple coats of paint for each of your colors. Chalk paint is great because it's super pigmented, and so there's not as much liquid, which makes it more transparent. And so chalk paint is great because it doesn't tend to need as many layers as, say, acrylic paint. Reds and yellow paints also tend to be kind of tricky and require more actual paint than others, just because there's something in their pigment that makes them that way. But yeah, like for me, I'll be able to do 2 coats of paint for everything except for a yellow. The yellow in there, the one that I just did, that's going to take 3 coats of paint, which is fine. We have time, don't we? Don't have anywhere to be. Boy, I'll tell you, I live such a busy lifestyle. Like my daughter's in dance and my son plays sports and I've got cork and craft parties and all this kind of stuff. Having nowhere to be for 6 weeks is, I mean, it's good and bad, but it's pretty relaxing to know that I don't have to rush all the time. I feel like I'm living a far more relaxed lifestyle. It definitely has its drawbacks though too, you know, but I'm just trying to stay positive during all of this, and thankful. And my husband is still working, which is great. I'm trying to work as much as I can with my business and online sales. Hang out with you guys over the computer. But yeah, it's kind of nice to just be able to slow down a little bit, take naps, go for a walk. My son and I went for a walk today. He pogoed on his pogo stick and I walked. So that was kind of fun. He had a great workout by the time he was done with that. Okay, so I have done my first coat of everything. Like I said, anywhere between 2 and 3, maybe even 4 coats of paint, depending on the colors that you're using. But once it's all dry, this is what it's going to look like. Look at that magic. I have one already prepped. Okay. The last step of this project is to pull off the stencil, and that's what we're going to do right now. For this part, you're going to need your fingers, and you're going to need something like this. It's a Cricut tool. These are available at Joann's and Michael's, but hopefully you already have one of these at home. If you don't, there's very little that actually needs this tool. So you could potentially even use like a paper clip, or an end of a small scissors, or an X-Acto knife. Obviously, with these tools, parental supervision is really important because they're a little pokey. So, but the majority of the work that you're going to be doing pulling the stencil off is actually with your fingers. So I'm going to put this tool down for now, and we'll just work with our hands for now. So you should be able to grab a corner of your stencil, and you're just going to pull back. Like I said, don't pull up, pull back on itself. And as you peel, you're going to reveal the actual design, and all those crisp lines, and the lines are crisp because we sealed the stencil. It's very magical. Now, sometimes, even for people like me that make signs for a living, sometimes a little bit of your background paint peels up, and that's okay. We can fix it, okay? I will show you how. So in this Trust Jesus design, the only part of the stencil that didn't originally come up with just pulling it off with my hands is on the inside of that R. So I'm just going to show you how to do that really fast. Hopefully it's okay, easier enough for you to see at this angle, but you don't want to use it like this. You want to use it like this. We don't want to stab into the wood and like scrape it away. We actually want to use it as this is a really technical term, a getter underneather kind of thing. So we just want to get underneath the stencil and lift it up and off, and that's it. And like I said, if you don't have one of these tools, you could probably get away with using like just a little teeny tiny tip of a scissors, or even a paper clip when you open it up. Just something that can grab that little piece and pull it off, okay? You could maybe even use your fingernail, but you just have to be careful so you don't scrape. Now, if you were to look carefully at this, it'll be hard to see here. There are a few spots that the white paint on the background did pull up. It happens to people even just like me. So what you're going to do with that situation is you're going to use your smaller paintbrush, and you're just going to use a little bit of paint, and you're just going to do really, really teeny tiny touch-ups with that. Just kind of filling in those spots where the paint pulled up just a little bit. It happens even to the professionals. And if it doesn't happen to you and you're a professional, then you should tell me how you do it. Okay. All right, friends, we have officially finished this project. You have a cute little rainbow sign. Hopefully these signs and these designs are inspirational to you during this time of shutdown. I love this one just because I need to be reminded daily that I need to trust Jesus. The other one, Shine Your Light, is a favorite of mine as well because I just feel like we all have something to give to the world, and that's our light. And if you share your light and shine your light with the rest of the world, you might inspire or encourage somebody else that needs a little bit of a pick-me-up. So anyway, thank you so much for joining me with this little project. I hope you enjoyed it. And I will be doing some more in the future. So stay tuned for that. Thanks for joining me, and we'll talk to you later.